The quiz show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire operates under a simple and thrilling proposition. Answer 15 trivia questions in a row and you can instantly become a millionaire. Over the course of the show's run, it has become a cultural phenomenon and remains one of the greatest game shows and simply television shows in history. As evidence of the show's cultural import, if you've ever heard someone quip that they want to phone a friend or ask someone, "Is that your final answer?" These phrases are pulled directly from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. After premiering in the United Kingdom in 1998, it quickly swept through Britain, pulling over 19 million nightly viewers. Soon, ABC in the US took notice and picked up the show to begin airing in American adoption. And from there, the show has grown into becoming an internationally viewed and recognizable icon. Today, we're going to look back at two of the most enduring and engaging characters that emerged from the decades of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. One man who was so obsessed with winning the million at any cost that it drove him to fraud, and one who conquered the show with grace and genius. Let's start with an overview of the show and how it functions. The format begins with what's called the fastest finger round, as a group of contestants who are trying to get on the show race to arrange a set of events or items in a correct order. The first contestant to correctly put the items in the correct order then proceeds to the main game. Once on stage, contestants were asked increasingly difficult questions by the host, Chris Tarrant, and they must choose the correct answer from one of 4 options. They have 3 lifelines to help them along the way. The first is Ask the Audience, where all of the live studio audience votes on a correct answer, and the person in the seat can either take this recommendation or not. Most of the time, they'll end up taking it.
Oh, that's quite high.
Yes,
It's about as high as you can get out of 100.
I would say so.
But they could all be mad.
I think we'll go with St. Clement's being the final answer,
I
Chris.
thought we might.
Oh.
It's the right answer.
Phone a friend, where they can call someone for assistance, and 50-50, which eliminates 2 of the incorrect answers, leaving them to pick between only 2 remaining. Contestants can walk away with their winnings at any point, but if they answer incorrectly, their prize money then drops back to a predetermined level. The ultimate goal is, of course, to reach that final 15th question and walk away with the million. It is a pure and a simple show, and it was wildly successful. Over the decades, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire has been adapted by 120 different countries, won 7 Emmys, and produced some of the most captivating moments of television that we have ever seen. Here are 2 of those stories. In the early 2000s, with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire near the zenith of its arc of popularity, a trio of Brits, Major Charles Ingram, his wife Diana Ingram, and Diana's brother, Adrian Pollock, took notice of the show and its potential riches. The group tuned in weekly and started studying trivia on their own time. They were dreaming of one day making it on that show. Soon enough, this dream of making it on the show turned into a fanatic obsession, as they spent thousands of pounds dialing into the audition phone line. After months of effort and reportedly around 1,700 phone calls, Adrian, Diana's brother, was the first of the group to be invited to sit on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire stage. Once there, Adrian played well, all things considered. He answered 10 questions correctly. On the 11th, he used 2 lifelines for the question, in the USA and Canada, Labor Day is celebrated in which month? Upon receiving some guidance from his phone a friend that he should go with May, it's September,
Labor Day is May, I think.
Adrian locked in the incorrect answer, and his run came to an end.
At last, after over 2 years of trying, got £32,000. Give him a big hand.
Nothing to sniff at, but it wasn't what he came for. Then, 4 months following Adrian's appearance on the show, Diana Ingram was called up to compete in the fastest finger. She earned her way into the hot seat and embarked on that gauntlet of questions that she hoped would make her a millionaire. But Diana also only made it to the 11th question before her run ended, after she answered Edward Lear for the question of who wrote this nonsense poem, The Hunting of the Snark. They were looking for Lewis Carroll. Because of this, Diana was sent home with exactly the same amount that her brother was sent home with, 32,000 pounds. So the trio's hopes rested on the shoulders of Major Charles Ingram. He soon made his way through the over-the-phone selection process and then the in-person test, finding his way into the hot seat. However, things were immediately looking shaky. Through the first 7 questions, which are intentionally not designed to be that difficult, Charles was forced to use 2 of his lifelines already. And overall, he just did not seem that confident in many of his answers.
I believe it's French, but it's a bit tricky, this one, because I think although they might have come from Normandy, they sort of even the Normans originated from Denmark. So I'd like to ask the audience, please.
OK, audience, let's see if you're up on your soaps.
I think think I'll phone a friend, please.
Okay.
As production wrapped for the day, the sentiment shared by everyone on set was that this guy Charles was probably not going to go too much longer. Then, a miracle occurred. The next day they came back to set, and Charles Ingram somehow, some way, answered the next 8 increasingly difficult questions, all the way to the million. You may be able to guess what happened here. As a subsequent and high-profile court proceeding would determine, on that second day of filming, the Ingrams, alongside another accomplice, Tequin Whittick, conspired to brazenly cheat their way to £1 million. Angus Harrison explained in Vice that the trio had devised a system to carry Ingram through the higher reaches of the game. The Major would read the 4 possible answers, and Whittick would cough after the correct one. On hearing the cough, the Major would know he had said the right one and proceed to offer this answer. It sounds ridiculous in theory, and in practice, it absolutely was. Take a look at this footage. Charles is faced with the question, who had a hit UK album with Born to Do It? One of the answers, Craig David. Charles quickly decides to rule this one out because simply he had never heard of him.
I just can't. I don't think I've never heard of Craig David, to be honest.
It's quite well
It's
known.
that simple. I've just never heard of Craig David, so.
He almost settles on A1 as his final answer, but Charles continues to deliberate. He reads out the answers again, but this time he hears a well-timed cough when he reads Craig David.
A1 or Craig David.
So he pulls a 180, changes his mind from A1 and instead locks in Craig David, the guy he had never heard of just minutes before, as his final answer, which of course turned out to be correct.
I mean, I'm 80% of the time I'm wrong when I guess, so. No, I'll go Craig David. Yeah.
And went for Craig David, who he'd never heard of. You just won £32,000.
Watching back the rest of Charles's run is kind of a surreal experience, as he stumbles his way to £1 million. You can audibly hear coughs and even a clear no at one point as Charles nearly locks in another incorrect answer.
I'm pretty confident it's Aristotle Onassis. But I think it's cricket, but I'm not sure. But the reason I think it's cricket is I think it's Paris.
You 500,000.
Armed with this brazen help, Charles answers every question correctly, and the show wraps with the host Chris Tarrant excitedly calling him the most amazing contestant we have ever had.
Unbelievable. £1 million! I have no idea what your strategy was. Just go. Your sub-strategy, you are so brave.
However, following the conclusion of the episode, the staff was immediately suspicious. By the time the Ingrams left the set, an investigation had already been launched into Charles's miraculous ability to answer questions he seemingly had no idea about. This investigation resulted in the production team accusing Charles Ingram of conspiring with his wife and Tequin Whittick to cheat to procure the correct answers throughout the course of the show. The case went to trial and was followed by millions with great interest. Throughout the court proceedings, the lawyers on behalf of the show showed the jury the many instances of well-timed coughs that coincided with Charles Ingram's meticulous reading of all 4 answers and then choosing what just happened to be the correct one.
Take cricket. I think it was Holbein.
Amusingly, all this talk of coughing must have had some sort of psychosomatic effect on the jury, as the verdict of the trial had to be delayed due to coughing fits throughout the 12 members of the jury. But after a break to allow them to cough, the Ingrams and Whittick were found guilty of procuring the execution of a valuable security by deception, and subsequently received 18-month prison sentences and were stripped of the £1 million. After the conclusion of the trial, the Ingrams were constantly subjected to people coughing at them in public, and Charles Ingram was dubbed the Coughing Major. Reflecting on this fantastic tale, Angus Harrison wrote that the story of the Coughing Major is a tale as timeless in morality as it is peculiarly rooted to the moment in space and time within which it occurred. The army man's attempt to steal £1 million on television, with little more for help than sheer dumb luck and a terrible fake cough, is a fascinating incident even today. Grotesque in its stupidity, tragic in its context, and hilarious in its execution. It's a fitting description of a fascinating crime of obsession and desperation, a very public attempt to steal £1 million. So with that, we can turn to our next story of a man who similarly answered 15 questions in a row, but the details are just a little bit different. we turn our attention to the United States version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. An IRS agent tunes in with some friends to watch this show that is sweeping the nation. He is uninterested at first, but he quickly realizes that he's having little to no problems answering the questions alongside the contestants on the show. As the folks in the hot seat progress from the small amounts and the easier questions, and they approach the million and get to the difficult questions, this man, John Carpenter, has no issue continuing to answer along. He recalls that we turned it on and I couldn't believe how easy the questions were. And it wasn't just the first few either. I decided I had to try and get on. So John Carpenter decides to try his hand at the million. Within 2 days, he's sitting on the set of the show. Soon enough, John wins fastest finger and is subsequently called up to the hot seat. Over the next hour, audiences at home and in the studio were treated to an absolute clinic of trivia knowledge. Question after question, this IRS agent confidently answered them correctly, again and again. On top of this, John found himself not even needing to use a single lifeline.
You're right. Close encounters for the third time. You won $8,000.
Before long, John was sitting on winnings of $500,000 and was one question away from the $1 million grand prize.
So, the answer is C, Hinduism.
I think he's getting bored. But he's right again for $250,000. Frank Gehry. I am paid.
I am paid.
For $500,000, my friend, that's your final answer, and it is... I am paid!
At this point in the show's run, in November 1999, no one on either the British or the American show had gotten to this point. The most anyone had won was Jonathan Green, who correctly answered 13 questions and earned himself £250,000 on the British version earlier that year. So, all eyes turned to John Carpenter as the 15th and final question was read.
These U.S. presidents appeared on the television series Laugh-In. Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford.
John sees the answers, takes a breath, chuckles a little bit, and then tells the host that he's going to use his phone-a-friend lifeline to call his dad.
I'd like to call my parents right now.
As his dad picks up the phone, John tells him,
Hi, Dad. Hi. I don't really need your help, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to win the $1 million.
As the audience cheers, he locks in Richard Nixon for his final answer.
Final answer heard all around the world. He's won $1 million.
And with that, the titular question of the show was answered, as John Carpenter became a millionaire. In the mania following this, John and his wife were thrust into the spotlight, with John appearing as himself in a Saturday Night Live skit, being invited to Good Morning America and Oprah, and even publishing his own book of trivia quizzes. Way to spread the love. Half a year after his original run, he was invited back onto a Champions edition of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where he got through 13 questions before tapping out and taking home $250,000. This made him one of the winningest game show players in history, with net winnings of $1.25 million. After all this fanfare slowed down though, by all accounts, John Carpenter returned to a normal, quiet life with his wife, just $1 million richer. These two stories are both perfectly unique and simple. Charles Ingram was obsessed with winning $1 million, so much so that he was willing to cheat his way there in an extremely public venue. John Carpenter was the first person to stand up to the simple premise of the show. Answer 15 trivia questions in a row and you become a millionaire. And he did so triumphantly. Charles and John are perfect characters to highlight the appeal of the show. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire took hold of viewers' consciousness through simple storytelling that led to fantastic moments of tension. Through every question that was answered, every lifeline that was used, and every time a contestant made the decision to risk answering a difficult question, the tension was palpable. To win $1 million, just answer 15 trivia questions. Because of that compelling premise, we tuned in. And as viewers tuned in, we were witness to some of the greatest and most suspenseful moments of television that we've ever seen. And so Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, along with Charles Ingram and John Carpenter, will go down in television and pop culture history. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this story and this format. If you did, I have some other video essays like it on my channel. For instance, I just covered a story about the Y2K era when people were scared about a code bug that was going to happen between 1999 and 2000 and the kind of fears surrounding that. Super interesting, and you guys should go check it out. I'll see you all in the next one.